The demolition and seizure of Palestinian structures also continues. The demolition of structures linked to vital water connections in Area C of the West Bank communities already suffering from water shortages is particularly troubling. I'm concerned by the continued pressure being placed on Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Such policies must be reversed, and Israel should abide by its obligations under international law. I'm saddened by the persistent violence that continues to result in the tragic loss of Palestinian and Israeli lives. Recent incidents in the West Bank and Gaza highlight the mounting tensions across the occupied Palestinian territory and the risk of a broader escalation of the conflict. I call on the parties to reject violence and to work to reduce tensions. There is no justification for terror, and I call on all to join the United Nations in condemning it unequivocally. I am concerned that we may once again be facing another very dangerous escalation of violence in Gaza, with potentially catastrophic consequences. The last 2 days have shown how precariously close we came to the brink of war once again. The indiscriminate launching of rockets and mortars against towns and villages violates international law and places civilian lives at great risk. The launching of incendiary and explosive devices towards Israel must also stop. I remain gravely concerned by the number of deaths and injuries of Palestinians along the Gaza perimeter fence as well. Israeli security forces have the responsibility to exercise restraint, and lethal force must be used only when strictly avoidable in order to protect life. I strongly condemn the campaign of arrests and violence inside Gaza against protesters, including women and children. The brutal beating of journalists, human rights workers, and the raiding of homes is particularly alarming. The long-suffering people of Gaza have a right to protest without fear of reprisal, and I call on all member states to join the United Nations in condemning such acts.
The United States strongly condemns the rocket attack on Israel from Gaza yesterday that injured 7 innocent civilians, and we reaffirm Israel's right to defend itself. Mr. President, I think we can all agree on the need for Israelis and Palestinians to work together with the support of the international community to improve conditions in Gaza and the West Bank. But this malicious and insidious violence is a clear signal from Hamas and others in Gaza who see such cooperation and progress as counter to their aims. Each of us around this table has a responsibility to condemn the rocket attacks. But we must also recognize that in addition to terrorizing Israeli civilians, Hamas has failed to provide for Palestinians in Gaza, and most recently, cracked down violently on Palestinian protesters. Over the last few weeks, thousands of Palestinians in Gaza came out to protest against Hamas and the dire economic and humanitarian situation in Gaza. Hamas security forces responded with sweeping arrests and violence against protesters, including women and children. Journalists were brutally beaten, and 15 local journalists were jailed. According to Amnesty International, and I quote, "The crackdown on freedom of expression and the use of torture in Gaza has reached alarming new levels," end quote. Mr. President, we agree that many factors have contributed to the situation in Gaza, but the international community needs to shine a light on Hamas's injustices, such as rocket attacks into Israel and encouraging and praising violence against innocent Israelis, but also how they treat their fellow Palestinian brothers and sisters. Mr. President, as you know, yesterday President Trump signed a proclamation recognizing the Golan Heights as Israeli territory, a decision of critical strategic and security importance to the State of Israel. To allow the Golan Heights to be controlled by the likes of the Syrian and Iranian regimes would turn a blind eye to the atrocities of the Assad regime and the malign and destabilizing presence of Iran in the region. Mr. President, the U.S. administration has made clear that there can be no peace agreement that does not satisfactorily address Israel's security needs in the Golan Heights. I thank you for your attention.